the whole process of marketing from an analytical perspective, finding the right customer, finding the highest value customer, and targeting them or having a conversation with them, all the way to the creative generative AI aspects driving marketing assets that you may use, the creative assets. All of that will also have to change. So organizations need to understand these tools that are available and are becoming available and how to take full advantage of that.
Hi, I'm Greg Stewart, CEO of MMA Global, the international nonprofit trade association for CMOs who are focused on architecting a new future of marketing.
I'm Rex Briggs, an author, market researcher, measurement inventor, and entrepreneur.
I'm Greg Stewart, CEO of MMA Global.
I'm Rex Briggs, an author, marketing researcher, entrepreneur, and now Chief AI Officer at Claritas. And this is Decoding AI for Marketing.
So Rex, today's guest, I mean, you invited him, so I don't know. You want to kind of set this one up a little bit? I'm super excited. Like I'm sort of like I'm like anxious with anticipation to get into the conversation here. But go ahead, introduce for our listeners.
I had the opportunity to be on about 4 panels with Gopi several months ago, and he was just such an impressive thinker on AI. I mean, Gopi Kallayil is author of The Happy Human, Being Real in an Artificially Intelligent World. He is also Chief Business Strategist for AI at Google. Welcome.
Thank you, Rex. Thank you, Greg. Glad to be here.
So the first part is in your role, you're focusing on how AI is going to change the experience for end consumers. You're working with, big marketers. You also are, in my view, a Renaissance man. I mean, you are interested in yoga and music. You probably go through my area on your way out to Burning Man. I was impressed by the holistic way in which you were thinking about the changing world. And the fact that you were at Google at the very, very beginning, you've seen this amazing arc. And I felt this electricity, this energy buzzing from you, that this was much bigger than anything we've seen before. Did I pick up the right energy, or where's your head at? Where do
Absolutely.
you think
All
this
of
is
that is
going?
right. And I think this is definitely the most profound invention humans have ever come up with. And it's a very exciting time to be alive and all of us to be part of this industry and shaping the dialogue and the evolution of this technology and the cultural and civilizational shift that this will entail.
Well, that doesn't sound like much is going to change then. Well, so from a marketing standpoint, just everything.
Same old. I guess. Okay, good. I mean, so we could just keep doing what we've been doing, Gopi. We don't have to make any real efforts here. Just more TV ads or something. I don't know.
What do you see that's going to change the most? Tell us, unpack that a bit for us.
Oh, AI is going to actually touch every aspect of our life and function and operation. It's going to change medicine. It's going to change music. It's going to change manufacturing. And it sounds like a lot of hyperbole, and that's an AI system. Um, and it's a foundational technology like the wheel or electricity. And if you think of it, in electricity, we take it for granted. But if you pause to think about it, it powers and drives so many aspects, including this conversation that's going on. There's so much of electricity in all of the different devices. It moves our cars, it heats our homes, it drives manufacturing and lighting. So if you look at just electricity itself, which has been around for us for a couple of 100 years, and how it has touched every aspect of our life, from transportation to manufacturing to food production, and then now 10x or 100x it. That's the kind of impact AI will have, in that it is a foundational technology, and it's got this unique aspect that it really captures natural intelligence, human intelligence, encodes it into a computer software system, and then amplifies it. So if we just start with that premise, if you think of our natural intelligence, it pervades every aspect of our life. It's there in education, it's there in music, it's there in medicine, it's what drives financial transactions. So AI has the power to actually be part of every aspect of those processes, whether it's business or or in our personal life. And that's why I say this is like the most profound transformation that we can think of. And maybe if we take a couple of different examples and
Yeah, I think
start, start
bring it alive, Gopi. Yeah, give some examples to kind of what it's doing because I think we've kind of all heard that, and even Sundar even said it's the most dramatic change the world may ever seen, or some variation of that. So obviously, in Google, I think at one point it hired more AI people than any other company in the world, and so but what does that really mean to an end to people to a person?
Sure, sure. Yeah. Let's take a very, very foundational industry that we all understand. Let's take food. And I
Okay.
was having a conversation with several companies actually that are into food in a variety of ways, Pepsi Cola, Nestle, etc. So take something as foundational as food and our relationship with food. And I was telling them, if I look at my grandparents who were farmers in India, they grew 95% of the food in the yard around them. So my grandmother's relationship with food was she would go out into the yard, cut what she needed for each meal because she didn't have a refrigerator, and cook it and feed us. So it was plant to pot to plate. And
Yeah.
if I contrast that with my niece's relationship with food and how it's about to change because of AI as well, for my niece, her relationship with food is always through this device. This is a remote control device with which she uh, thinks she gets her food. But in the future, I can imagine a scenario where through an AI powered agent, she might just give some parameters saying, hey, Oregon State won the game. We're just celebrating. There's six of my friends. Here are some dietary preferences. We have $100 budget. And the food will get delivered to a door. It might even be sourced from multiple restaurants or producers. And when the food arrives, all of these people who receive it might just be able to pull out the device and point their camera at it and instantly get a lot of information about nutrition. So how she thinks about food and nutrition is going to change very dramatically. And because of AI, it might actually track what you've consumed over a period of time and be able to guide you and direct you. And then as you consume the food, these days people are become highly educated where they monitor different things in the body in response to food. So your glucose level, and you can have these kind of devices that actually monitor it and give you the feedback. Okay? So just from a consumer perspective, and similarly, their exploration and decision making around food will uh, change very dramatically because thanks to AI, they'll have information about ingredients and nutritional levels and what is appropriate. And each one of us can make very, very particular choices. You can imagine scenarios where some of the information is then passed on to your healthcare provider or a nutritionist. It's all aggregated within an app, and that might drive a lot of uh, lifestyle based decisions that you may have to take, or you might receive coaching on it and receive guidance. In response to that, then let's take it to the actual producer, the manufacturer of, or the supplier of the food. Their processes are also now going to change very dramatically in the way that they will have a future conversation with you, Greg, versus how they have it with Rex. It can be highly, highly customized because they know Rex's individual preferences or particular situations in which Rex has to consume certain amount of food. And and then take it further along the value chain, beyond marketing to actually producing the food itself. The production process, the product design, all of that will change. And it could be AI powered, where AI is able to now look at vast amounts of data and analyze that there are shifting trends in certain types of food and certain types of production. Or the AI system might even be smart enough to guide the producer, saying, we anticipate uh, a glut in a certain type of food or a lack of supply, and therefore in the next season we might produce something very differently. And I can create endless scenarios like this, but thanks to AI smartly guiding decisions from a consumer perspective all the way to a big corporate global entity, uh, manufacturing and distributing food, you can then imagine how all of this is going to change. It's already started changing as a result of AI powered tools.
So let's zoom in on part of that because you gave a very comprehensive, every single aspect of the value chain enhanced because of AI or changing because of AI. Let's zoom into the marketing side of it because you touched on that for a moment, but it's a very interesting scenario where AI is connected to the Internet of Things. It's connected to our nutritional information. Maybe it's connected to our intentions for our own diet and weight and health. And it suggests that there is probably an AI mediating our relationship with the manufacturers in ways that has never happened before. I mean, I remember sitting actually, I was in Unilever's boardroom with Sir Martin Sorrell from WPP and the agencies we represented. I worked for him back then, and they're like, "Oh, we're sick of having a media company and the TV people sitting in between us. We want the internet to disintermediate everything." And I remember asking after that, after Unilever, whoever the exec had said that, he said, "Well, aren't you just replacing one mediator for another one? You go from NBC to now, the online version equivalent, or AOL was big at the time." This seems even more significant than just one media company, becoming the new mediator of a relationship compared to the old one. This is like a whole new AI agent or entity. How do you see that working? What does that look like to you in the marketing future with AI and all this connected data?
Well, first of all, we can't see AI just like one entity or one thing. Often it's used in that kind of a connotation in the language, but I see it more as a capability that is going to be deployed across all of the marketing processes, and that capability could come from many different organizations, many different kind of research and scientific thinking. And in many cases, it's going to be that company itself. You mentioned Unilever. So Unilever itself will think about how do I use AI as a capability across my entire value chain or business process. Some of it they might build it themselves on top of technology stack that is available. So it is not like one thing you get out of the box. And AI is a competency, I would say. There are many, many aspects to it, and this is where people often refer to as this one thing. I prefer to think of it as like an entire human capability that is going to come into our hands. Of course, we'll use a lot of tools and software systems, etc., to enable it.
Do you think it will be more fragmented, or do you think it'll be more consolidated?
It'll be highly distributed, is how I would say it. Like there is some
Mhm.
AI capacity or capability that'll be across all of these touch points and processes. Again, I go back to this example of think of a consumer having that intent for a product or a service all the way to exploring it and then purchasing it, using it, and then talking about its usage and getting value out of the usage. And across that entire chain, there will be some kind of AI capability that is embedded in it. So let's start with this example of somebody wanting to watch a movie tonight. And this is where once that intention is set or communicated, an AI system actually, in case of like Netflix, tells you what you should watch based on your past patterns and preferences. So right there, it is directing it, and then you might actually be watching it. And right now, we watch uh, a movie linearly, the same. But if you look at a particular show, Rex, you and Greg get to, and I get to see the same thing. But in future, you could imagine again with AI tools, the exact same show could have multiple branches and paths based on our individual preferences. This is not currently scenario, but I can well imagine that kind of happening. And then going on beyond that example, let me use autos just to change the industry. Today, if you buy an automobile, you're really buying a computer on wheels because automobiles are so sophisticated in terms of all of the electronics. And when you drive it, as when you compare it to the cars of 30 years ago when there was like a basically a mechanical device, now it's a highly electronic powered device. And it is not unfathomable to imagine how AI, this competency called AI, could be in the car that adjusts and adapts to your individual style, your driving style, your particular comfort needs, your preferences. There are even experiments I've seen where it tries to sense the emotion of the driver and changes things in the environment. If you are relaxed or if you're more agitated while you're driving, based on voice and other things, it measures and tries to adjust the mood and the music that plays. Uh, all the way to these cars are now more sophisticated that typically when you buy a new car, you get this 300-page manual. Who has the time to read it? And
Hmm.
the expectation of the consumer increasingly will be, if I have a particular dashboard light come up, I have no idea what it is or how to respond to it. I should be able to pull this device, and again, an AI powered agent will detect what is the thing and communicate back to you. So there are many, many ways by which across
Okay.
the entire, in any product or category that you can think of, you an AI powered competency will actually change so many aspects of how we relate to these things. Uh,
Right.
Classic
Hey,
example. I mean, it's very current. Right now, I'm sitting in the house with no hot water. The hot water system died suddenly, abruptly, and there's a mechanic down there trying to fix it. And I was sitting there thinking, why was it not alerted 2 weeks before, saying that the system is going to fail? And I asked him, like, why did
right,
it go suddenly from hot water to just cold water in the house? What changed? And he
right.
said it's developed a leak and it was dripping down, and then apparently the heating system does not work with the drip around it. But it went like in an instant. It went. Now it's like in my day three without hot water in the house when it's getting fixed. But I hope.
That's a very
But
timely example. My wife and I had to replace our whole kitchen, laundry room, et cetera, because of a leak while we were out of town from our house in Tahoe.
yeah,
And Greg had mentioned to me, "What you didn't have the what was it the Moen smart meter,
Moen's got to
which
flow.
has an
Right.
AI
Right.
thing that turns itself off when it detects." Now, if I take a shower for more than 30 minutes, it detects that that's not the right pattern and turns it off while I'm in the shower, which I don't love. But yeah, as
Just
the AI gets
probably
smarter and
probably for
better.
just probably just for bad hygiene though, like just overwashing.
yeah.
Hey, Gopi, basically, I'm a little concerned about your auto example though. I think you were saying that AI is a backseat driver, and I'm not sure I like that. So I'd want to see the actual articulation. But let me ask you a question. Your job at Google is in part to help advertisers, marketers, consumer companies, maybe B2B companies too, help understand how to look at the new consumer in an AI driven age. Is that part of what your role is there?
Or even more broadly, I would say all Google partners, business partners,
Okay,
to understand
good.
the leaders of those companies and CMOs included, to understand how AI is going to change
Okay.
their industry, the behavior of the consumers, and how to then adapt to it.
Okay. So what is the so you've kind of given some sense of that here, but maybe just sort of summarize for people. And I take some of MMA's biggest members, AT&T and T and General Motors and Unilever and some of the big consumer companies. So what is your main thesis for them? I mean, I think what I heard that, it sounds like we're going to get smarter and more personal. I hear that, but is that what you're really advising them or trying to help them understand is what the future vision looks like?
Well, my main thesis would uh, fall into three areas. First is
Okay.
that no matter what industry you pick, insurance, auto, consumer products, food,
Yep.
consumers are going to behave differently because there is going to be AI capabilities in their hands, in the devices that they use, in their phones, in their watches, and in how they search and look for information, how they make decision about what products to buy and evaluate, etc. So you need to
Okay.
understand that shift that is taking place and change your marketing or business model. The second is, because we live in a highly digitally enabled world, there's huge amounts of data that is being generated at every single touch point. And
Yep.
therefore, organizations have vast amounts of data, and you can use AI powered analytical tools to drive your decisions and behavior because you have this much
Okay.
data. A simple example of that is how retailers now recommend to you, here are the things you may want to consider buying, or people who bought A
Yep.
also bought B. In
Yep.
fact, I've heard 35% of Amazon sales is driven by the recommendation engine, which we didn't
Hmm.
have. many years ago, because with the data that you can do things like that. So that is the second, how you analyze all of this data and therefore be of higher value to your consumers because you can put things in front of them thanks to this data. Third is the whole
Okay.
marketing process itself is going to change. And here
Mm,
I talk to marketers and businesses about to think about two aspects of AI. Because of all of the sudden explosion in generative AI tools, conversational AI, bots, etc., a lot of people tend to gravitate towards that, or they get excited by the fact that AI can generate images from text. All of that is good.
right.
But let's not forget that there are two aspects of AI. If AI mimics the human brain, there is the right side of a brain which is responsible for creative thinking, and therefore generative AI mimics that creative thinking power of the brain. And we're also left brain creatures in that our left brain does a lot of analytical, logical thinking, and there are analytical AI tools that work with all of this data that they have and help with your decision making and future thinking. So putting it all together, the whole process of marketing from an analytical perspective, finding the right customer, finding the highest value customer, and targeting them or having a conversation with them, all the way to the creative generative AI aspects driving marketing assets that you may use, the creative assets, all of that will also have to change. So organizations need to understand these tools that are available and are becoming available and how to take full advantage of that.
How
So I'll give
fast can we
you,
make this change
sorry,
happen?
okay.
Because I know you started with the electrification example, and if you look at the arc of take electrification in a city, the time period that went from when J.P. Morgan had a dynamo under his house on what 30 whatever street it was in Madison to where the city was electrified was decades. And the time that went from okay, we had electrification, so now we can put an elevator, and now we're going to build skyscrapers and cities became skyscraper driven since people no longer had to stop at the fourth floor and they could go up higher than they would be willing to walk. That took decades. This seems like it's happening in a much more compressed period of time. Yet, I think Greg would probably tell you it still feels kind of slow for how fast marketers go to adopt things like AI personalization and technologies that have been around. Give me a little bit of an idea of how fast you see the transitioning happening and what marketers who want to win and come out ahead need to do to move faster.
Sure, yeah. Uh, there's no question that this technology itself is moving very rapidly. Each uh, next generation of these tools that are being announced are now happening in months, actually. Now, we've gone from conversational AI that most of the world became aware of somewhere around November, December of 2022, all the way to here. We are sitting in 2024 with the world getting excited. Like a few days ago, looking at text to video generation tools with almost
Crazy.
realistic videos, right? And the time span in which all of this is happening has shrunk very rapidly. The second thing that I'm also noticing, Rex, is that a decade ago or so, when a new technology would come out, it would take a while, a couple of years at least, before it would ripple across the entire world and every part of the world was aware of the technology, was using it in some capacity. Now that's just in days and it just ripples across. And when I travel around the world, and last year I was in 14, 15 different places, and whether I go to Chile or Argentina or Australia or Canada, the conversation is about the latest wave of technology, the news about it, the awareness of it, the sophistication with which people understand this, at least a small subset of the population, is pretty incredible. I've never seen anything move across that fast. So that's also great. And it is a global effort that is underway in terms of people understanding these technologies, contributing. If you just look at the names of the people involved and where they're from, again, every part of the world seems to think as scientists, computer scientists are part of this effort and are contributing to it. You asked another nuanced question: how quickly will this get adopted by organizations, and when will it become pervasive in every aspect of the system? And there, I would break it up into, I think there will be some early adopters who are trying and experimenting very early, but a vast majority of organizations will take, I think, years before they get into it in a big way. And there's another aspect of it that I've seen in that typically happens in enterprises, which is how long will it take before it becomes seamless and pervasive across the enterprise, in every part of the company using it and every part of the world that company using it. So if you look at someone like a global giant that might operate in 100 plus countries, with these technologies, what I'm expecting, what I'm seeing is there might be one group that is experimenting with it and trying things out. But by the time it gets across all aspects of marketing and in all parts of the world, I think that could take a few years for it to happen. I could be wrong, but that is how I'm seeing it play out currently. There's also a little bit of reluctance in some parts, or a conservative approach, saying this is exciting, but I'm not quite sure. Let me see if someone else will do it and learn from that, and then I will wait till I adopt it.
But what do you think about that approach, Gopi? Would you recommend that? So if you're running, I don't know who we want to pick on, Unilever, GM, AT&T, so we don't pick any one company.
Yeah,
What would be your advice to them?
yeah. So I would say definitely a high level of curiosity should drive this. And new technologies emerging. It's emerging rapidly. It seems to be incredibly powerful. So you want to go towards it and understand it quickly, and ask the intellectually provocative question: how will it change my business? How will it disrupt my business? And I want to get in early, even if it's in a small way, so that I have a good understanding of it. So developing that understanding across the organization, and particularly in the leadership, I think is very important. Know what it is and what its capabilities are. The second part of it is a spirit of experimentation. You want to try running at least small experiments with it.
Hmm.
And there's no better way of learning and learning what it means for your organization than running these experiments. And you can do small contained experiments around the technology, certain
Hmm.
aspect, one product, one market, etc. And you'll very quickly learn. You have to learn what it means to your organization. It's a whole other thing to see what's going on in the outside world. Because when you do these experiments, you will learn what it means for
Yeah.
you, and you'll also learn certain limitations, what skill sets you lack,
Yeah.
what you'll quickly find out that your data may not be up to mark in the way that you
Yeah.
currently store it. So you'll realize how much work there is to really implement and roll it out. And so move quickly, be highly curious, run experiments. And as soon as you see bright spots in certain experiments actually delivering results, start scaling it. And if you have any level of success, scale it very quickly across the organization globally, would be my approach.
Hey, Gopi, let me ask you a funny question. I don't know if you
Sure.
feel like you have enough vision for this kind of thing, but do you think I mean, given how fast it's moving, and I think we agree, right? I don't think anybody's going to dispute that, especially when you saw the announcement by OpenAI, what is now just a couple of days ago. And even your sort of revision advanced Gemini now, too, is sort of incredible what's happening there. Do you think we're going to see a lot of companies kind of miss the mark and go out of business because they hesitated? I mean, I'm not sure if we saw people get crushed by the internet age. Did we when browsers came along, Rex? Do you remember back when there people
Every
really hurt
generation
and
of
harmed?
technology has left a people who have died off. I think it's a very
Yeah.
good question. It used to be 20, 30 years ago, there was a paper about how it wasn't the first movers that won, it was the fast followers who then
Mm-hmm.
reframed themselves and said, no, no, we were really first, but they weren't if you actually look at the record. I think a USC
Right.
professor did the paper. But today, I really wonder if Greg's question is
I,
right, which if you can't afford to be a fast follower because there is a accelerating return to AI because it's a virtuous cycle. You feed back once you
yeah.
do have your mechanism in place through your experiments and you feed back your data, you're spiraling up and your systems are getting smarter and better and smarter and better.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think I want to hear your answer to Greg's
And,
question because I think
and
that's right
and
on.
and if I'm going to set a little more context around that if I can too, just not to overcomplicate the question, but too, I was thinking a little. There was an article over the weekend from Vanity Fair around Condé Nast, and I knew Condé Nast when they were a great publishing venture. Oh my God, I wouldn't want to be caught dead in print right now. I mean, I wouldn't want to be caught dead in print 15 years ago, and so it was kind of like you had to have seen that coming from the browser. And then the rise of companies like Meta, Google for that matter, have been massive, giant. I mean, advertising businesses beyond the scale of anything we'd ever seen before. Your companies must be 10, 15, 20x the size of even the biggest of previous media companies. Does AI have that same kind of potential to reorder the world?
Absolutely. Every platform shift is accompanied by disruption.
Yeah.
So when, I mean, take an example that we'll all understand. The way Friday night, Saturday night entertainment, in the living room would be organized was
Yeah.
primarily through
Totally.
sources like Blockbuster, right? And now that is,
Yes.
and then when a company like Netflix came out with a different model that they were able to do first with simple concept of don't even come to us, we will send DVDs to your
Mm-hmm.
home, and they did it
Simple.
through using existing uh, systems like the mail. But very
Mm-hmm.
quickly they moved it to live streaming, and all of a sudden there was no need for consumers to go to Blockbuster. That entire company and other companies like that. And Blockbuster employed, I think, like 95,000 people at the turn of the century, and now they're not in operation, or Tower Records, etc. Right? All concept of entertainment, music, etc. How we consume it, use it, changed very dramatically, and that caused a disruption. It went from carrying it in your pocket, 5,000 songs in your pocket, all the way to now I don't even need to carry it. I just will it, and it'll somewhere from the internet it arrives into my earbuds through a variety of technology layers in it, and that completely changed the industry. And it's not just simply Blockbuster Tower Records. Even the fundamentals of the music industry has shifted with
Shifted. Right.
streaming, and it has created an explosion of human creativity. If you look at the number of songs from artists you've never even heard of, but that is pretty good, from all over the world, that you can listen to on
Pretty
YouTube
good.
Music or Spotify, etc. Right? Or take another simple example like personal transportation for rent, for hire that we would do between taxi companies and car rental agencies. And somebody had this brilliant idea that you could do much more better matching of personal transportation capacity that's available plus your need, and use this device as the medium by which you could do it. And it's ripple across the world in what, 10 years, in every part of the world you go. And it's not just Uber or Lyft, but there are locally created companies like Kareem in the Middle East, or Ola cabs that I see in India,
Yeah.
etc. It changed personal transportation, right? And anyone who
Yeah.
had the who had a traditional model of personal transportation around rental car agencies or taxi companies, etc., have had to completely retool. So that is a
Yep.
given. Anytime there's a technology shift, and you've mentioned print, etc., all of those are going through a sea change. And retailing is another example of dramatic shifts that is taking place in terms of not having to go to a physical store, but getting everything delivered to your doorstep, and in many cases coming directly from the supplier in another country. And there are services that enable that now, which go straight from the
Right.
supplier directly into your house. So yes, there is going to be a huge amount of business model shift because of this technology, even bigger than I think what happened with consumer internet or what happened with mobile.
Right.
I think that's really
You know.
interesting because Greg and I wrote a book in 2006, and part of the premise of the book was that the reason why a lot of marketing fails is because they skip over understanding consumers' motivations. So if we had I think the four M's, it was motivations, message, and media mix, and then you need to maximize your results by kind of continuously optimizing. But I feel like in the last decade or so, 15, 18 years since that book was written, marketers took part of our message, which was to do the maximization and continue to cycle and optimize, but they actually forgot the motivation, which was the very first foundation. And so they've gotten really good at growth hacking, but they forgot to actually listen to what's in the hearts and minds of consumers. And it feels like what you're saying is they all have to go back to first principles and say, what does a consumer really want? What
Yeah,
need are they really gratifying? And forget how we've been doing it. What's a whole new way we can do that with this new technology? Is that right, or do you think about it differently than that, Gopi?
absolutely. And there's also one step beyond that that I would talk about, Rex. So understanding what consumers want and the most fundamental needs, and fulfilling it is really what marketing and business is all about. But
Mm-hmm.
those wants and how consumers want is also now going to change because AI puts a certain amount of power in their hands that we
Mm-hmm.
might not even have imagined or anticipated. And to be able to adapt to that is super important. So I'll give you kind of a hypothetical example, but almost possible, which is, let's take sports, live sports, and we all watch it. And we watch a game, football or basketball, and we watch the exact same game. And typically, when someone interprets that game for us, like expert commentators, they give you a view of the game and what's going on the court or on the field. But because of AI, there is now a capability that consumers will have in the future, and that will change the way our demands and expectation of what we want from live sports. And what I mean by that is, you may have a favorite player or a favorite team, Rex, and therefore you want the entire commentary, the the camera views, everything told from your personal preferences, which is, I like this team, I like this particular player, and therefore want every shot or interpretation based on that. And Greg may watch the same game, and he might have a completely different set of preferences. And thanks to AI, he can get his view of the game that fulfills his fan preferences and his team preferences. So this is not a stated intent at this point in time, but in future that becomes possible because of AI powered tools. And this can be for shows that you're watching or movies, um, books that you read.
Isn't that Isn't that already happening with the news we consume? And what is the risk as you think, and how do we mediate this risk of increased fragmentation where people get their own version of their experience? And does marketing play a role in still creating that water cooler effect and bringing people back together, or do we become so personalized that we will expect more fragmentation, more tribalism, less coherence as a society? What's and that's a big question, but you're a big thinker. What do you think about where we might
Well,
be
you
going
use
with
the
that,
word
Gopi?
increased risk, and uh, I don't know if I would word the use risk. I think uh, it's a shift, and probably we should embrace it in a very, very positive framework. If we can give everyone exactly what they need when it comes to entertainment and or any of the choices that they have, isn't that a good thing? With all of this, ultimately the consumer wins. Consumer gets their preferences, and it'll seem like fragmentation, but the world is such a big place that there are enough people going towards each fragment, as you call it, and still us being able to have like a mass platform. Uh, Let me use YouTube as an example. This notion that in a currently, here are the stats: every minute, about 600 hours worth of video gets uploaded to YouTube. So the amount of content that gets there, and there's content for each one of us, however we choose. So let's say all three of us are interested in cooking our own food, but we might have individual tastes. And if I like Thai vegetarian cooking that does not include peanut sauce, I have choices there, recipes there, and chefs that will talk to me about it. And so our individual needs are met. It is true. It is it a bad thing? No, it is a good thing. Our We get our personal preferences taken care of by
Yeah.
this infinity of choices, whether it's music or whether it's cooking or to learn about something, right? So this is available. And yet, from a from a culinary perspective, a company like McCormick's, which makes spices, can still see from the data there is some general trends that is taking place between Rex preferences and Greg's preferences and Gopi's preferences, and we can still market to them. What they individually do with the spices will become three completely different things because they watch different channels on YouTube, and their culinary preferences in the kitchen are going in three different, you call it fragmented directions. But there's still some unifying theme that that the data tells you that you can still take advantage of and you can still market. Uh, but if you switch it to the other extreme, if these companies have to market individually to Rex and Greg and Gopi, they can now do that because thanks to digital technology, we have reached a stage where even that is possible as well.
Hey Gopi, so we get so I mean we're kind of back to a point you made earlier, right?
Yeah.
That there's just a greater sense of personalization. It's one of the big advantages of it that there's sufficient computing power, speed. You know, now the play by Sam Altman to maybe do chips that sort of rethink in this era. All that becomes a quantum. You know, everything becomes sort of compounding. That's where we're heading. So, if it is around personalization, I'm going to ask you the kind of harder unanswerable question, but see what you do with it. For mobile, it was Uber, right? That was the killer app. Do you know what the killer app for AI is going to look like? Do you have any idea where you'd search around for the killer app? Because I don't think we've seen it yet, have we? I don't think it's just the Sora for for Gen AI text to video as powerful as that was. What do you think it is?
Um,
What do you think really sets the world ablaze?
I would have liked to answer saying killer apps because there are going to be so many. I mean, just in healthcare alone, I can think. But if you were to
Mm,
force me to think
okay.
like that, and
Okay.
hold on a second, I'm going to come with something which I think might be the
Okay.
one that is really the game changer. It is conversational AI capability. Uh,
Oh, okay. Okay.
because that natural language processing
Mm,
capabilities of AI, where humans can talk to an AI system, uh, Gemini, ChatGPT, uh, etc., that humans are using it, and that is uh, much like I think in consumer internet, search was the killer app, right? Everyone could
yeah.
find what they
Yeah.
want.
Search was search ultimately is
2
really
billion
killer
people
app.
embrace it very
100% agree.
quickly. In a similar way, I think conversational AI will be. And it's not simply just to go to a conversational AI tool that is publicly available. I think humans will get used to that kind of conversational AI capability being available in so many other aspects of their life. And this goes back to the point I was making, Rex, that it is
Yeah.
not one thing,
Yeah.
it is a competency. So this is how the competency will play out. So right now, you can go to Gemini and have a conversation. I can upload a picture, point a camera at something. It's multimodal, right? I can talk to it, it talks back to me, and it does it in different languages. I can even switch languages in the midst of the conversation and say, go from English to Spanish and Telugu in the future. So it allows for all of that. But you get so used to it, much like the search capability that was available with search engines and with what Google did with its own unique flavor of search. Now has become our expectation every time I interact with anything on the internet. You go to your healthcare provider, you look for the search option. You go to an app, for music or food, you look for the search option, right? So search has become similarly that conversational AI capability. And the way I see it playing out is that right now, imagine that you're putting together a complex international itinerary. You're going to go from San Francisco to Dubai, and you're touching down in New Delhi, and then finally ending your trip in Sydney. You have to talk to a real person to do the scheduling and the back and forth and the different options, etc. But in future, would not be surprised if an AI agent on the Emirates sites is able to guide you, taken to address your needs based on your unique personal travel needs, and help you build an itinerary based on that in a conversational format in multiple languages. So that kind of conversational AI capability will be seamlessly available whether you go to a commercial site or you go to a government entity and are trying to sort out one of your government service that you require.
Yeah, well, I think you raise a really interesting point, that something that I wrote about with my co-author in the last chapter of our book, which is um, whether or not these are the privacy issue becomes when well, I should say when these AIs know us so well because of the conversations we're having. How do we ensure that that data is in our control or private and so forth? Especially as you begin to think about some countries that maybe don't have quite the same freedoms that we have in this country and so forth. Do you have any thoughts about what the right privacy architecture should be?
Yeah. So with all of this, that's why it's important that
Yeah.
we also build responsible AI, where it takes into account what is the data that it has, and the guard, it's the checks and balances are in place. And it is also another aspect of this whole revolution that is happening much faster than I've seen in any other wave of technology. These questions are being asked very early on in the process and are being put in place. Since we mentioned some ancient analogies like electricity, etc., one of my favorite examples, Rex, is if you look at fire. A few million years ago, humans discovered fire. We found it highly useful because it warmed our caves, it kept predators away, it cooked our food. But then we also, at some point, started recognizing the dangers of fire, that it could cause you personal harm, that it could burn your house down, or it could even be used in an arson situation by someone else. Over a period of time, we put in checks and balances, and we don't pause to think about it, but it's impressive what human beings have done in terms of checks and balances, including, for example, that in every town in the world, small, big, there's a fire service sitting around 24 by 7, waiting to be alerted if something goes wrong, and they have a response capability. And therefore, we don't worry about it. No building today in the modern world can be occupied without a third party coming and inspecting, checking to make sure that the building meets fire codes and there is fire detection systems in place. And if something goes wrong, then there's another backup system of people ready to respond to it, highly trained and very, very with sophisticated processes, etc. And even with all that, sometimes people deliberately cause intent harm with fire. So every country in the world has arson laws against fire. It's built into the penal code. Right? So it's amazing how throughout the world we blanketed with a set of safety systems, which is why we generally are comfortable around fire. But it took us thousands of years to get to that point where,
And interestingly, we had a tax system that basically distributed the risk or the compliance
exactly,
with the laws and so forth. Yeah, I mean, anything that we can do to run faster on that with AI, we'd love to help and work with you on that for sure.
exactly, yeah. So with AI also, we'll put that in place because already people, the right kind of people, are asking these questions, and
Yeah.
everyone from regulators to independent third-party bodies to companies that make these technologies are all part of the dialogue. And I'm blown away by how quickly it is happening as compared to other technologies. These checks and balances are being asked early on, and it is not unlikely that soon we'll have an entire independent sub industry that is primarily thinking about safety and governance and privacy, etc. All these points that you raised. Again, an example
Yeah.
to use is we develop software, and then people started developing malicious software and transporting it through your email systems, etc. And it created an independent third party industry for antivirus software. And now we install it on our machines, on our phones, and its on server systems, etc. So those guardrails are there. Similarly, for AI, again, we'll have independent third party entities, whether from the private sector or from the government, to make sure that we are using this technology with the right checks and balances.
Okay. Gopi, this has been phenomenally interesting. I feel like I could kind of go on forever, but I don't know the listeners will stick around for 7 hours of sort of our conversation with you. So we probably should wrap here, then come back as sort of either new news or what comes out. Rex and I have a question, though, we kind of like to ask at the end here just for everybody because it gives us sort of sense of it. So, I mean, I don't know if you feel like AI is overhyped, underhyped right now, but if you were to pick parts of it, just sort of, quickly, what do you think is either most underhyped, like what is most underappreciated for AI, and or do you, or and if you don't want to answer it, you go, what do you think is most overhyped in AI right now? I say, well, I don't know. There's real there.
No, I'll go with the underhyped part first.
Go.
The underhyped part is, as I said, there's the right brain aspect and the left brain aspect, and the left brain is the analytical AI. It is a little boring, and therefore often people don't talk about it. Or for
Hmm.
the common consumer, it's even hard to understand and grasp because it's behind the scenes. It deals with predictions, it deals with pattern recognition data, etc. And I think that's where a huge amount of real innovation will happen. Uh, Generative AI is shiny, it's interesting, it's fun, image generation, video generation, etc. But things that really have impact on the human condition, I think a lot of it will come from the analytical AI tools. I'll give you two examples, which again most people don't
Yeah.
understand, but it's very, very profound. One is the way that uh, DeepMind solve the protein folding problem. Proteins are the fundamental building blocks of life. The 20,000 in the human body, they drive everything from how food is digested to how we can see or comprehend ideas. And yet most of the proteins have not been studied. In the past, they were not because it's very complex. It typically took a PhD 5 years to understand a single protein, and there are not that many people going into biology to study proteins. So it is a very slow process. In all of nature, there are 200,000, 200 million proteins. Only 4% were studied. And if we knew more about proteins, we would advance
Yeah.
plant, animal, and human health uh,
Hmm.
at a rapid pace. But it was a very complex problem. Traditional biology would have taken a billion years. Let me repeat that, a billion years, because 200 million proteins, 5 years per protein, it would take you a billion years to solve. That was solved in 4 years using machine learning models. And now every single protein is documented. You can even go to the database called AlphaFold. It's publicly available, it's open source. This is an incredible thing. I can go to my phone, go to AlphaFold, and look up protein structures for all the proteins. And this was done thanks to the uh, analytical AI capabilities that we built. A million biologists use it now on a regular basis. And this alone, I think, will advance animal, human, plant health in a phenomenal way in the next 20, 30 years with all the subsequent research that
Hmm.
will come out of because you now have access to the protein structures. Very hard for many people to understand both the scope of the problem and the impact that it'll have, but I think it is going to be profound. Another example that
Okay.
I'll give you, and that we can close up with that, is one of the most complex problems, Greg, that humans have tried to solve for is the weather. How to predict the weather, because it determines so many aspects.
We're not. Oh, help the weathermen. They need help. Yes, go ahead.
But it addresses so many aspects of our life, right? From what to
Yes. Yeah.
wear, to when you leave for the airport, to
Yep.
agriculture, to
Yep.
disaster relief in case we have extreme weather. All of that, air traffic control, all of that is determined by the weather. But it's been very, very hard to predict. And we had a somewhat advanced system that the world uses for predicting medium term weather that comes out of a weather lab research center in Italy. And lately, we announced, or Google announced, GraphCast, which predicts 10-day weather, medium term weather, more accurately than we've ever done before. And actually uses AI, specifically, it uses machine learning techniques to look at past weather, all the data that we have, and recognize what patterns. So if you say there are the 100 parameters, let's say, that determine weather, it looks at it and says, then I know in the next 3 days from now, this is the weather that we can expect for this part of the world. So the fact that we've been able to make advance in weather prediction to the extent that we have using tools like GraphCast, which is AI powered, is phenomenal because this is going to solve so many aspects of our life. Like I said, from what to wear to air traffic control to manufacturing, transportation, etc. Again, it's not something most people will understand or relate to, but it is profound. And I think that aspect of what AI can do is very underhyped.
Well,
Wow.
that is a great place to end the show. I'm particularly excited to see what happens with microbiome next after the protein fold part, because for every human cell we have 9 or 10 other cells that we're host to, and that we're just beginning to crack into computational biology and putting the whole puzzle together. And I'm so excited about the work that you're doing, that Google's doing, that others in the space are doing. Thank you so much for being on this episode,
Yeah.
Gopi. That's it for this episode of Decoding AI for Marketing. I'm Rex Briggs.
And this is Greg Stewart.
Be sure to catch all our episodes, plus subscribe, follow, rate, and review in your favorite podcast app.